tell you, round the bloody twist is how I feel. It's working here that does it to you. Tips you right over the edge. When did it start, you say? Well, it's always been like that. Goes with the job, really. But lately, I'll tell you when it got really bad. When I found Tallulah buttering a toast with the suppositories. You'll see her later when we take a tour of the home. You can't miss her. She wears a tea cosy on her head. It was my fault, I suppose. We keep the suppositories in the fridge, you know, for the comfort of the residents. And I normally make sure we get to breakfast making before Tallulah comes to help. But now she's one of them that's up all hours of the day and night, so confused about what time it is. She's beaten us to it. Happy as Larry she was, squeezing some of them out, spreading them on good and thick for all and sundry who were in the dining room ready for the breakfast, bless them. It would appear that she thought they really were those individual butter portions. And she used to be such a well-to-do lady, Tallulah. So she'd even set some of the suppositories out, all nice like, in a butter dish on ice. I just thought they looked a funny colour on the toast. You know, all pale like Lurpak. And I thought, that's not spreading like Lurpak. Tallulah, what have you done? But by then a lot of them had already eaten the toast. Still, I don't suppose it could have done them any harm. Most of them are quite used to suppositories. I mean, it's just gone down the wrong hole, hasn't it? Well, don't look like that. It's hardly a shocker here. If you were in a care home for the elderly like me, you'd be used to the fact that they get all mixed up with the memories, where they put things, how to do things, who the loved ones are. And you can't get the staff these days. Oh no. People think we're being saved by the Eastern Europeans. It's a myth, that. Take the other day. One of them died. One of me octogenarian ladies. Nora was her name. So I said to Svetlana, and you have to be very clear with Svetlana, she's very literal. I said, Svetlana, take Doreen out of the way while the funeral director comes in for Nora. Very clear I was. So the funeral director arrives and there's a kerfuffle. What's to do, says I. We can't find her, says Audrey, his second in command. What do you mean you can't find her, says I. You can't find who? Nora, says Audrey. Well, she can't have gone for a bloody walk. She's dead, says I. Well, where is she then, says Audrey. I don't bloody know, says I. And I have to say at this point, Arthur, the funeral director, was getting very shirty because he was late for his own lunch and he's ruled by his stomach, that man. And it doesn't look good when you lose one of them, you know, especially a dead one. So I thinks to myself, bloody typical, if you want a job doing, you have to do it yourself. I mean, how hard can it be to find a dead one? Not to mention the large, slightly overweight dead one. I can tell you by now mild panic was rising as Audrey had already phoned the Rellies. The Rellies are the bane of my life, by the way, but that's another story. So there's me trooping about the home, searching all nooks and crannies, finding incontinence pants where they shouldn't be, getting caught up with the residents and all the funny little ways, whilst I'm really looking for an urgently required missing body. I go first to the bedroom, the one Nora shared with Doreen, and I find Doreen with her leg up on the bed, putting her stockings on, because she thinks she's got a date with the GI. Can she have my ration book? No, Doreen, says I haven't got a ration book, lovey. How about a nice cup of tea instead? Oh no, she can't possibly have a cup of tea. She's going to be late for the GI. And then I know what that means. She'll be trying to climb out the window again. You watch. She must have been a right scamp in a day, that Doreen. Anyway, no Nora. So then I catch Bertram, that's Mr. Cartwright to you, trying to release Freddy the Budgie again. And poor Freddy's hardly got any feathers left as it is, since Mavis Merriweather tried to give him a bath and a brush up. So then the poor little sod's taught himself how to copy the sound of the telephone. I think it's a survival tactic. a way of shouting for help, like, that bloody bird. He has all the staff running up and down like blue-ass flies, and now because he's so stressed, little Freddy is on telephone ringing overdrive, with Bertram repeatedly trying to get him out of his cage so he can find him an Anderson shelter, and still no sign of Nora or Svetlana. Where the bloody hell is Svetlana, thinks I, when who should come out of the lift, bold as brass, but Svetlana pushing a wheelchair. Who should be in the wheelchair, hair firmly gripped in Svetlana's iron fist to hold her head back, but poor dear Nora. I did wonder when I first saw them coming out of the lift how the heck she'd got Nora out of bed and into the chair, Nora being so big like, but then I remembered that Svetlana had been a weightlifter, an Olympic contender no less, until she got into a brawl over a man with another competitor. I think that's where she lost most of her teeth. I said, Svetlana, no, lovey. Just bob Nora back in her bed, 'cause Arthur's here and the rallies are on the way, lovey. Quick as you can. She looked at me like she'd got a rotten smell up her nose. She's got a very caustic look, that Svetlana, when she's got one on her. Her eyes go all beady-like, and it reminds me she's got her appraisal coming up soon. I must remember to reiterate in the strongest terms possible that we are never, ever, ever to have another Yuri Gagarin day. Not ever again. Svetlana's father was a Russian, so it was her idea of a sort of celebration for some anniversary or other. And I must admit, she put a lot of effort into it. But incontinent people must never, ever, ever be served borscht. You know, that livid purple beetroot soup. Well, I tell you, what a mess. We were bleaching every surface and every orifice for days. Some of them were even peeing purple. I said, Svetlana, lovey, it was all a good idea apart from the soup. She'd a face on like a sucked lemon for days afterwards, and Marjorie, who does our laundry, still isn't speaking to her. And the poor residents were very confused. Most of them don't know their Grigarins from their Gellers, and a lot of cutlery went missing. We even found a fork in Freddy's cage, which worried me. It reminded me of last summer's barbecue when Mr. Cartwright appeared clutching Freddy in a skewer. Said he'd been watching Jamie Oliver and which end went on first. I've taken to keeping poor Freddy in my office, just till the feathers grow back. And do you know that bird's amazing? He's only gone and learned the new ringtone now we've had all the phones changed over. Still, it did backfire on me, because he's quite the mimic, our little Freddy. When the council inspector for care homes came out to inspect us the other week, I thought, he doesn't look so bonny at the moment, Freddy, so I'll cover him up with a cloth, you know, over the cage. Well, every time the inspector asked me a question, up pipes Freddy. It's a bloody madhouse here. The inspector didn't seem amused, and he was even less so when Freddy came out with his other favourite sentence. Put Freddy back in the cage, Mr. Cartwright, he'll get cold. That budgie sounds so like me, it's uncanny. I had to show him the bird in the end up, and I don't think he would have marked us very high for our care of ancillary pets, being as Freddy was so cross at being covered up, he'd picked out his last little feather. But worst of it came as I was seeing the inspector off at the door. He was just getting into the car with me all of a dither, as it hadn't really gone very well at all, what with the inspector being such a misery, guts and all, when all of a sudden Mr. Cartwright shot out of the door shouting, "Telephone, Mrs. Shaw." I was just about to say, "Not now, Mr. Cartwright," when I noticed he'd forgotten to put his trousers on again. He's got a habit of doing that, Mr. Cartwright. Anyway, all I could think of was the lasting impression, the memory of Greenacres Care Home for the Elderly that the inspector must have driven away with. A half-naked Mr. Cartwright bellowing into the nether regions of a budgie, with poor little Freddy going, "Put Freddy back in the cage, Mr. Cartwright, he'll get cold." Mr. Cartwright, who's never believed in underpants, was thankfully quite unaware that his own undercarriage was blowing in the wind. Needless to say, we didn't score very high with our visit, but I hope you don't leave us with any other thought than what a happy little bunch we are here at the Greenacres Care Home for the Elderly.